AITA for confronting my wife at her work after finding out she cheated? My wife, Emma, and I have been married for 5 years. We've been together since college, and up until recently, I thought we had a strong relationship. Emma is outgoing, warm, and the kind of person who lights up any room. I'm quieter, more of the background guy who loves supporting her in everything she does. She's my best friend, and I've spent the past decade building a life with her. A year ago, Emma got a new job as a marketing manager at a startup. She was over the moon about it, and I was thrilled for her. The job required long hours, frequent networking events, and occasional weekend trips. While the schedule was demanding, I never questioned it because she was so passionate about her career. Then things started changing. Slowly at first. About 6 months into her new job, Emma became distant. She was still sweet and affectionate, but there was an edge of distraction about her. She started spending more time on her phone, giggling at texts or guarding it like it held state secrets. I chalked it up to work stress. She also began going to more networking dinners with her colleagues, particularly her boss, Matt. I didn't think much of it at first. Emma spoke highly of Matt, saying he was a mentor figure. But then there was her behavior around me. She stopped initiating conversations about her day. When I'd ask her how her trips went, she'd be vague or dismissive, claiming she was too tired to talk about work. She also started canceling plans with me, something she'd never done before. My gut was telling me something was off, but I didn't want to be that guy. I trusted Emma. We built our relationship on trust, and I hated the idea of doubting her. Everything came crashing down 2 weeks ago. Emma went on one of her work trips with Matt and a few other colleagues. She was supposed to be gone for 3 days. On the second night, I got a message on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was a random woman who claimed she was at the same hotel as Emma and had seen Emma and Matt together. She attached photos. There was Emma sitting in Matt's lap at the hotel bar, laughing and leaning into him. Another photo showed them walking hand in hand toward the elevators. My heart dropped. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't say anything immediately. I wanted to give Emma a chance to explain before jumping to conclusions. When she got home, she acted completely normal. Hugged me, kissed me, and even brought me a souvenir from the trip. I asked her how the trip was, and she gave me her usual, "It was fine, nothing exciting" answer. That's when I showed her the photos. She froze. Then she started crying, swearing that nothing happened and that Matt had too much to drink, and she was just helping him to his room. I didn't believe her. The next few days were a blur. Emma admitted to an emotional affair with Matt, but swore it hadn't gone beyond that. I didn't buy it. Why would she lie so much, be so secretive, and act so guilty if it was just emotional? I started digging deeper. I looked through her phone when she was asleep. I know, not my proudest moment. What I found broke me. There were texts between Emma and Matt, confirming that their emotional affair was anything but. They had been sleeping together for months. The texts were explicit, filled with plans to meet up and declarations of how special they were to each other. I couldn't keep it together. I went to her office the next day, hoping to confront her and Matt privately. But when I got there, she was in a meeting. Her assistant wouldn't let me see her, so I waited in the lobby. When Emma finally came out, she looked shocked to see me. I told her we needed to talk. She tried to brush me off, saying she was busy, but I couldn't hold it in. I blurted out that I knew everything, that I'd read the texts and seen the photos. Her coworkers heard everything. Matt came out during the commotion, looking smug. I wanted to punch him, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. Emma begged me to leave, crying and apologizing, but I was too angry and humiliated. I told her I was done and walked out. Now, it's been 2 weeks since the confrontation. Emma has been blowing up my phone, begging me to come home so we can work things out. She's apologized repeatedly and says she'll do anything to fix this. Our families are divided. My parents think I'm right to leave her, but her family thinks I overreacted by confronting her at work. They say I humiliated her and that it's understandable she made a mistake because of her stressful job. I'm staying with a friend while I figure out my next steps. Part of me feels like I overreacted, but another part of me feels justified. I didn't yell or make a scene. I just stated the truth. So, Reddit? AITA for confronting my wife at her work and refusing to forgive her? What do you think? Should OP forgive Emma? Or was the confrontation justified? Thanksgiving has always been a big deal in our family. My mom is one of those people who starts planning for it right after Halloween. She calls it the sacred family gathering, and anyone who dares skip it might as well disown themselves. This year, I was especially looking forward to it because it was the first time in years that we'd all be together under one roof. My sister Laura had been living overseas, and my brother Mike had been swamped with work and couldn't make it to previous gatherings. So, needless to say, I was excited. A little background. Laura and I have always had a bit of a strained relationship. She's 2 years older than me, and growing up, it felt like she thrived on pointing out every little thing I did wrong. If I got a B+ on a test, she'd brag about her A. If I made the varsity soccer team, she'd remind me she was the team captain when she played. It's not that I didn't love her. It's just that being around her felt like being constantly evaluated. Anyway, back to Thanksgiving. Everything started off fine. The turkey smelled amazing, the table was beautifully set, and everyone seemed in good spirits. Laura had just returned from a year-long stint in Paris, so naturally, she was the center of attention. She regaled us with stories about the art galleries she visited, the French cuisine she'd mastered, and the chic Parisian lifestyle. Honestly, I was happy for her. She seemed genuinely passionate about her experiences, and it was nice to see her so animated. But then, as the evening wore on, things took a turn. Laura started slipping into her old habits. She made a snide comment about how my mashed potatoes were a little lumpy. Not quite Michelin star quality, but nice try. She laughed when I mentioned I'd been promoted at work, saying, "Oh, so you're finally catching up to me?" It was like being transported back to high school. I could feel my patience wearing thin. The breaking point came during dessert. My mom had asked me to make a pumpkin pie, something I'd spent hours perfecting. As everyone was digging in, Laura smirked and said, "You know, in France, they don't even bother with pumpkin pie. It's such an American thing. A little basic, don't you think?" Everyone laughed nervously, but I felt humiliated. I don't know what came over me, but I snapped. I said, "You know, Laura, not everything has to be a competition. Just because you've been to Paris doesn't make you better than the rest of us. Maybe try being a little less condescending for once." The room went dead silent. My mom looked like she wanted to sink into the floor, and my dad cleared his throat awkwardly. Laura, to her credit, didn't lash out. She just looked at me, a mix of shock and hurt on her face, and said, "I didn't realize you felt that way." The rest of the evening was painfully awkward. Laura barely spoke, and when she did, it was short and clipped. My mom tried to lighten the mood by talking about old family memories, but the tension was palpable. After dinner, Laura went straight to the guest room, and I overheard her telling my mom she'd leave early the next morning. Now, a few days later, I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I'm tired of always feeling inferior around Laura and letting her comments slide. On the other hand, I hate that I ruined what was supposed to be a happy family gathering. My mom is upset with me, saying I should have let it go for the sake of peace. While my brother thinks Laura had it coming. Laura hasn't reached out since she left, and I'm not sure if I should apologize or stand my ground. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for calling out my sister at Thanksgiving dinner? Or should I have just kept my mouth shut to keep the peace? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister move into my house? My name is Sarah, and I live in a modest 3-bedroom house that I inherited from my grandmother a few years ago. I've spent a lot of time and effort turning this house into my sanctuary. I work a stable but demanding job as a nurse, and when I'm not working, I love gardening, reading, and baking. All things that help me unwind. The 3rd bedroom in my house serves as a combination guest room and hobby space, where I store my gardening tools, books, and supplies for DIY projects. My older sister, Melissa, has always been the family favorite. Growing up, our parents gave her the lion's share of their attention and resources, while I often felt like an afterthought. Melissa is a charismatic, free-spirited person who's always jumping from one passion or job to another. She's never been great with money and has made some questionable financial decisions, but she has a knack for charming people into helping her out. A month ago, Melissa's landlord raised her rent significantly, and she's been struggling to keep up with her bills. She's been couch surfing between friends and family since then, and a week ago, she called me in tears, asking if she could move into my house temporarily while she gets back on her feet. According to her, she just needs a couple of months to save up for a new place. At first, I was sympathetic. I know how hard the rental market is right now, and I've always been taught that family helps family. But I hesitated because I know Melissa's history. She has a pattern of overstaying her welcome, creating chaos, and expecting others to clean up after her. She's also not exactly the most respectful of boundaries. When I asked Melissa about her plan for finding a new place, she got defensive and accused me of being unbelieving and lack of compassion. She assured me she'd be out within 2 months and said I was her last hope. I reluctantly agreed, but with conditions. 1. She had to contribute to household expenses. 2. She needed to have a job, or actively be looking for one. And 3. She would need to follow a clear timeline for moving out. She agreed. Sort of. Her tone was dismissive, and she made a sarcastic comment about me, treating her like a tenant instead of my sister. Melissa moved in last week, and things went downhill almost immediately. She's taken over the guest room and completely ignored the fact that it's also my hobby space. My gardening tools and books are now stacked haphazardly in the hallway. She brought more stuff than she said she would and has cluttered the living room with boxes. She's also been eating the meals I've prepped for work without asking, leaving dirty dishes in the sink and letting her laundry pile up. When I confronted her about the mess, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're so uptight, Sarah. Relax. This is my home now, too." That comment hit a nerve because it's not her home. It's mine, and she's a guest. The final straw came yesterday when I came home from a 12-hour shift to find that Melissa had thrown a small party. There were beer cans and pizza boxes everywhere, and one of her friends was passed out on my couch. When I asked her why she thought that was okay, she laughed and said, "You were at work and I was bored. Don't be such a buzzkill." I told her she had 2 weeks to find another place to stay. Melissa flipped out, calling me heartless and selfish. She accused me of abandoning her in her time of need and said I was prioritizing my stupid plants and books over family. She stormed out and called our parents, who are now pressuring me to let her stay. My mom said, "She's your sister, Sarah. You need to be there for her." And my dad chimed in with, "You've always been so rigid. Lighten up." Now I'm torn. Part of me feels guilty for kicking her out when she's struggling, but another part of me feels like I'm being taken advantage of. I've worked hard to create a peaceful life for myself, and having Melissa here is turning my home into a chaotic mess. So, Reddit, am I the asshole? AITA for taking my sister's wedding dress for my own wedding without asking? Okay, so here's the backstory. I have a sister, Mia, who has always been kind of a perfectionist. She's the type who plans everything down to the last detail. Growing up, she was always the one who got the attention, the one who excelled in everything. School, sports, friends, and even our parents' favor. I, on the other hand, was the quieter, more laid-back one. Always happy to stay in the background. Mia got engaged last year, and as soon as the ring was on her finger, she began planning her dream wedding. I was happy for her, of course, but I could already see how much stress it was causing her. I didn't mind being a part of it all, but she had a tendency to micromanage everything, even the smallest details. And I'll admit, I wasn't really involved in the wedding prep much. I'm not great at handling big, stressful situations, and she had a clear vision for everything. Now, here's where it gets tricky. When I got engaged to my fiancé, David, we initially wanted a very small wedding. We were both on the same page. We didn't need a huge, extravagant celebration. Our budget was modest, and we were aiming for something intimate. I was looking for a wedding dress, but because I wasn't feeling the whole princess vibe, I wanted something simple and understated. The issue was, I just couldn't find the right one. I searched for months, and I was growing frustrated. During a family gathering, Mia brought up her wedding dress, which she had just picked up from the tailor. It was stunning. A traditional lace dress with a long train. Perfect for her. I, of course, told her how beautiful it was, but then she mentioned how expensive it was and how much stress she had been through with finding it. Later that evening, when we were alone, I asked Mia if I could see the dress again, just out of curiosity. She agreed, and I ended up trying it on, which in hindsight was a huge mistake. When I saw myself in the mirror, something clicked. I loved how I looked in it. The lace, the fit. It was exactly what I had been searching for but could never find. Without thinking too much about it, I brought up the idea to Mia the next day. I told her how much I admired her dress and asked if she would be okay with me borrowing it for my wedding. I explained that I hadn't found anything I liked, and I felt this dress would be perfect for my own wedding. She was quiet for a moment, then said she needed to think about it. The next day, Mia texted me saying she didn't feel comfortable with the idea. She had spent a lot of time picking the dress, and it was supposed to be hers for her special day. I respected her feelings, but I still really loved the dress. So I did something I now regret. I took the dress. I called my fiancé, David, and told him I was going to borrow the dress. He wasn't thrilled, but agreed since he knew how important it was to me. I kept the dress hidden in my room and didn't tell Mia. When I walked down the aisle in her dress, I saw her face, and I could tell she was AITA for saying no to my brother's last-minute wedding request. My name is Amy, and I'm a 32-year-old graphic designer living in a small but cozy apartment in the city. My brother Jake is 2 years younger than me and has always been the golden child of our family. From the moment he was born, our parents doted on him endlessly. I was the responsible older sister, while Jake was the charming, fun-loving brother who could do no wrong. This dynamic persisted into adulthood, and though I love my brother, it has caused a fair share of friction over the years. This story begins about 6 months ago, when Jake and his fiancée, Emily, announced their engagement. I was genuinely thrilled for them. Emily is a sweet, intelligent woman who brings out the best in Jake, and I couldn't be happier that they found each other. Naturally, my parents were over the moon, and they immediately began planning an extravagant wedding. Jake and Emily wanted something smaller and more intimate, but Mom and Dad insisted on pulling out all the stops. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. My parents threw themselves into the planning, with Mom orchestrating every detail down to the floral arrangements and Dad insisting on a live band. I did my part by designing their wedding invitations and helping Emily with some DIY decorations. I even took time off work to assist with last-minute preparations. Despite the chaos, everything seemed to be falling into place. Until 2 weeks before the wedding. Jake called me late one evening, his voice hesitant and unsure. After some small talk, he finally came out with it. "Amy, we need a big favor." My immediate reaction was concern. Jake rarely asked for help, so I braced myself for what was coming. Emily's cousin, who was supposed to officiate the ceremony, had to back out. He explained, "Would you be willing to step in and officiate the wedding?" I was stunned. Officiating a wedding isn't something you agree to on a whim. It's a big responsibility, and I'd never done anything like it before. "Jake, I'm honored that you'd even think of me," I began, trying to sound diplomatic. "But don't you need to be ordained or something?" "It's really easy," he said quickly. "You can do it online. We'll handle all the paperwork. You just have to show up and say a few words." I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my forte. The thought of standing in front of 100 people and performing such an important role made my stomach churn. "I'm not sure, Jake," I said. "This is a lot to ask on such short notice." "Please, Amy," he pleaded. "Emily and I don't know who else to ask. It would mean the world to us." Despite my reservations, I agreed to think about it and promised to let him know the next day. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining myself stumbling over my words or forgetting an important part of the ceremony. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I called Jake and told him I couldn't do it. "I'm so sorry," I said, "but I don't think I'm the right person for this. I'm happy to help in any other way, but I can't officiate." Jake didn't take it well. He accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. "You're my sister," he said angrily. "You're supposed to have my back. How hard is it to say a few words?" Our argument escalated and he ended up hanging up on me. Later, I received a call from Mom, who was clearly upset. Jake had told her what happened, and she tried to guilt trip me into changing my mind. "Amy, this is your brother's wedding," she said. "You'll regret not helping him." I stood my ground, but the fallout was intense. Jake barely spoke to me in the days leading up to the wedding, and Mom made it clear she was disappointed in me. The tension was palpable during the ceremony, which went off without a hitch thanks to a family friend who stepped in to officiate. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow let everyone down. In the weeks since the wedding, Jake and I have barely spoken. Emily reached out to thank me for all the other help I'd given, but she admitted that Jake was still upset. My parents have taken his side, and family gatherings have been awkward and uncomfortable. I'm starting to question whether I made the right decision. So, Reddit, AITA for saying no to my brother's last-minute wedding request. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she burned every bridge in the family. I am currently at odds with nearly my entire family over an issue involving my younger sister, Sarah. To give you some context, Sarah has always been the type of person who gravitates towards chaos. Growing up, she was the rebellious one, sneaking out, partying, and testing every boundary imaginable. Our parents, for better or worse, indulged her behavior, often brushing off her antics as teens being teens. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, always picking up the pieces and admittedly resenting how often I had to be the bigger person. As adults, our lives couldn't be more different. I work as a project manager in a tech company, live in a small but lovely condo, and have a calm, stable life. Sarah, on the other hand, has been bouncing from one bad decision to the next. She's had a series of toxic relationships, can't hold down a job, and has a knack for alienating everyone around her. About 3 years ago, she borrowed $5,000 from our parents to start fresh. She promised to use the money to move to a new city, get her own place, and find a stable job. Instead, she blew it on a new boyfriend and their whirlwind trip to Mexico. When she returned, broke and jobless, my parents were understandably furious, but Sarah somehow managed to charm her way back into their good graces. That's the thing about her. She has this ability to convince people that this time will be different. Fast forward to 6 months ago, when Sarah hit rock bottom again. She had been living with our parents, rent-free, of course, when she got into a massive fight with them over her refusal to get a job. Apparently, my mom found out she had been secretly selling family heirlooms to fund her lifestyle. My mom was devastated, and my dad finally told Sarah she had to leave. Sarah then turned to our older brother, Mark, and his wife. They reluctantly let her stay in their guest room under strict conditions. She had to actively look for work and respect their household rules. Predictably, that didn't last long. Sarah would stay out all night, leave messes everywhere, and once even borrowed Mark's credit card without asking to buy concert tickets. After 3 months of this, they asked her to leave. Cue Sarah showing up at my door. She looked exhausted and desperate, with just a backpack and a tearful story about how everyone had turned their backs on her. She begged me to let her stay for just a little while until she could get back on her feet. She promised she'd follow my rules, get a job, and contribute to household expenses. She even swore she'd go to therapy. Here's the thing. I didn't believe her. Sarah has made these promises so many times before, only to break them. Letting her into my home felt like inviting chaos into my life. Still, I felt guilty turning her away. I told her I'd think about it and let her stay the night on my couch while I made up my mind. The next day, I laid out clear terms if she wanted to stay. She had to get a job within a month, contribute to expenses, and attend therapy. I also told her that any violation of my trust, stealing, lying, or general disrespect, would mean she'd have to leave immediately. She agreed enthusiastically, saying this was exactly what she needed. For the first 2 weeks, things seemed fine. Sarah found a part-time job at a local cafe and even went to one therapy session, or so she claimed. But soon her old patterns started emerging. She'd come home late, bringing loud, rowdy friends with her despite my no-guest rule. She borrowed money from me for groceries, but spent it on Uber Eats and cigarettes. One night, I caught her trying to sneak one of my necklaces out of the house, presumably to pawn it. When I confronted her, she broke down, crying about how hard her life had been, and how no one understood her struggles. She accused me of being judgmental and cold, saying I didn't care about family. I told her she had 48 hours to find somewhere else to stay. That's when the family backlash started. Sarah called our parents, sobbing about how I was throwing her out onto the street. My mom called me, furious, saying I should be ashamed of myself for abandoning my own sister. My dad chimed in, accusing me of being too rigid and not giving her a chance. Mark and his wife were more sympathetic, but they also suggested I give her one more chance to make things right. I refused. I told them all that Sarah's behavior wasn't just a series of bad choices, it was a pattern of manipulation and entitlement. I'd spent years cleaning up her messes, and I wasn't willing to set myself on fire to keep her warm anymore. Sarah eventually left, though I don't know where she went. I've been getting guilt-tripped by my parents ever since, with my mom calling me heartless and my dad saying I'm tearing the family apart. Even some extended family members have weighed in, saying things like, "But she's your sister, and family comes first." The thing is, I don't feel guilty. Not really. I've spent years trying to help Sarah, only to be taken advantage of every single time. At what point do I get to say enough is enough? So, Reddit, AETA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after everything she's done? Update. 2 months later. Since posting this, a lot has happened. First, Sarah ended up moving in with a distant cousin who's even more of a pushover than I am. Unsurprisingly, that arrangement didn't last long. From what I've heard, she's currently couch surfing with friends. My parents are still angry with me, though their frustration seems to have shifted towards Sarah's behavior now that the dust has settled. As for me, I've been focusing on my own mental health. I started seeing a therapist to unpack years of resentment and guilt surrounding my family dynamics. Setting boundaries with Sarah has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's also been incredibly freeing. Some family members still think I'm the villain in this story, but others have reached out to tell me they understand and even admire my decision. Mark, in particular, has been supportive, saying he wishes he'd stood his ground sooner. I've realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sarah's problems aren't mine to fix, and enabling her only prolongs the cycle. I hope she finds her way someday, but for now, I'm at peace with my choice. AITA for refusing to help my sister. Despite her pleas, when I was younger, my life revolved around my family. Growing up in a chaotic household with two younger siblings, Jake and Emma, I often found myself in the role of a third parent. Our parents were hardworking but absent, and their tumultuous relationship left me picking up the slack. While Jake and I maintained a close bond, my relationship with Emma has always been rocky. Emma was the golden child. She excelled in school, won beauty pageants, and had a magnetic personality that drew people to her. I, on the other hand, was the reliable one. The one who helped with homework, cooked meals, and stayed up late comforting my siblings during our parents' frequent fights. Emma and I clashed often. She thought I was bossy. I thought she was selfish. Over time, those childhood arguments snowballed into a chasm between us. Fast forward to adulthood, Emma's life has been a whirlwind of highs and lows. She got married young to a man named Ryan, who seemed perfect on paper but turned out to be anything but. After a tumultuous 5-year marriage filled with infidelity and financial instability, Emma filed for divorce. The fallout was devastating. She moved back in with our parents, leaving her career, friends, and what little financial stability she had behind. Meanwhile, I've built a life I'm proud of. I'm married to my supportive husband, Liam, and we have 2 young children. We live in a modest but comfortable home, and I've carved out a career as a freelance graphic designer. Life isn't perfect, but it's stable. A stability I worked tirelessly to achieve. The trouble started 6 months ago when Emma reached out to me, desperate for help. She was drowning in debt, unable to find steady work, and struggling with her mental health. Her request? She wanted to move in with my family temporarily while she got back on her feet. On the surface, it seemed reasonable, but given our history, I hesitated. Emma has a pattern. She's charming and persuasive, but often irresponsible and entitled. Over the years, she's borrowed money from family members without paying it back, missed important events because something more exciting came along, and generally left a trail of broken promises. Despite my reservations, I agreed to a meeting to discuss the logistics. During our conversation, Emma was her usual charismatic self. She promised she'd only need 3 months, she'd contribute financially, and she'd help with chores and childcare. But something about her demeanor, the lack of genuine remorse for past actions, the way she glossed over her role in her current situation, set off alarm bells. I told her I needed time to think. When I discussed it with Liam, he was supportive but cautious. "I'll back whatever decision you make," he said, "but we need to protect our peace. The kids come first." That's when I realized my reluctance wasn't just about Emma. It was about the potential impact on my family. After a sleepless night, I called Emma and told her I couldn't let her move in. Instead, I offered to help her find resources, job listings, financial counseling, even a small loan to cover immediate expenses. She was furious. She accused me of abandoning her, of being cold and selfish. She hung up on me, and we haven't spoken since. In the months that followed, the fallout extended beyond Emma. My parents, who have always been her biggest cheerleaders, called me heartless. Jake was more understanding, but suggested I could have handled it better. Even mutual friends weighed in, some siding with Emma, others with me. The guilt has been eating away at me, but so has the conviction that I made the right choice for my family. Recently, I found out Emma's situation has worsened. She's been staying with a friend, but is on the verge of eviction. She's still unemployed, and her mental health has taken a nosedive. The pressure to step in is mounting, but I can't shake the fear that doing so will only perpetuate the cycle. So, Reddit? AITA for refusing to let my sister move in, even though she's in dire straits? I've been second-guessing myself nonstop, wondering if I'm drawing healthy boundaries or just being selfish. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she uninvited my partner? Growing up, my sister Emily and I were inseparable. We were only 2 years apart, and our parents always said we were like two peas in a pod. But as we got older, life and different priorities pulled us in opposite directions. While I went to college out of state and started a career in tech, Emily stayed in our hometown, marrying her high school sweetheart, Tom. Fast forward to today, Emily is getting married again, this time to her fiancé, Jake. And that's where the drama begins. A few years ago, I met my partner, Alex. We hit it off immediately, and we've been together for 4 years now. Alex is non-binary and uses they/them pronouns, which is something that has never been an issue for me. But for my family, let's just say the road to acceptance has been rocky at best. When I introduced Alex to my family, Emily seemed polite but distant. I chalked it up to her being overwhelmed. She had just gone through her divorce with Tom, and I didn't want to push her. My parents, on the other hand, were noticeably awkward, though they tried to be kind. Still, I figured with time, things would get better. Now, Emily's upcoming wedding is a huge deal in our family. It's a big, fancy, traditional church wedding with a guest list of 300 people. She sent out the invitations months ago, and of course, Alex and I were both invited. I was genuinely excited to celebrate this new chapter in her life, until last week when I got the call. Emily: "Hey, we need to talk about the wedding." Me: "Sure, what's up?" Emily: "So, Jake and I were looking at the seating chart, and we realized we're over capacity for the venue." Me: "Okay, what does that mean?" Emily: "It means we need to make some cuts. And, well, Alex isn't family, so we thought it made the most sense." Cue my jaw hitting the floor. I tried to stay calm. Emily: "Alex has been in my life for 4 years. They're practically family to me." She sighed. "I get that. But this is my wedding, and I have to prioritize. Jake's family alone is taking up half the guest list." Emily: "You invited half of your coworkers and people you haven't spoken to in years. And Alex is the one who gets cut?" Her tone turned defensive. "It's not just about space. I mean, not everyone understands Alex's lifestyle. I don't want to deal with drama or make anyone uncomfortable." At that point, I lost it. "So you're uninviting my partner because you're worried about how they'll make your guests feel? Do you even hear yourself?" She snapped back. Don't make this about you. It's my day, and I get to decide who's there. I hung up, fuming. I immediately told Alex, who was hurt but said, "It's her wedding. If she doesn't want me there, I wouldn't want to go anyway." The next day, I called my parents to vent. My mom tried to play peacemaker, saying, "Emily's under a lot of stress. Maybe it's best if Alex sits this one out. It's just one day." One day where my partner is deliberately excluded because they don't fit into Emily's idea of normal. How is that okay? I shot back. My dad chimed in. "We're not saying it's right, but it's her decision. Don't ruin her big day over this." That's when I decided, if Alex isn't welcome, I'm not going either. I texted Emily to let her know, and she blew up my phone with angry messages. "You're really going to skip my wedding over this? You're so selfish. Do you even care about me at all?" Our family group chat exploded with opinions. Some relatives sided with me, saying Emily was being unreasonable. Others thought I was overreacting and letting Alex come between us. As the wedding approaches, the tension is unbearable. My parents are begging me to reconsider, saying it will tear the family apart if I don't go. Emily hasn't spoken to me since the text, but I've heard through the grapevine that she's been crying and calling me a drama queen. Alex has been incredibly supportive, even suggesting I go without them. But I can't shake the feeling that doing so would be betraying both Alex and myself. Still, I wonder if I'm being too stubborn. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she uninvited my partner? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after everything she's done to me? Hi, Reddit. This is a long one, so buckle up. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible, but there's a lot to unpack here. For context, I'm 29 years old, and my sister, Emma, 31 years old, is getting married in 2 weeks. On paper, we should have been close since we're only 2 years apart. But in reality, we've always had a strained relationship. Growing up, Emma was the golden child. She was pretty, popular, and charismatic, while I was the awkward, bookish kid. Our parents, now both retired, doted on Emma and were always her biggest cheerleaders. She got praised for everything, even things I'd done first. For example, when I got straight A's in high school, they'd say, "Great job." But when Emma did it the next year, it was a celebration with cake and balloons. The favoritism was even more apparent when Emma decided to pursue a career in acting. My parents poured money into her acting lessons, headshots, and auditions, even when they struggled financially. Meanwhile, I had to work 2 part-time jobs in college to pay for tuition. They didn't even come to my graduation because Emma had an important audition. Fast forward to now. Emma has a decent career as a commercial actress. Not Hollywood famous, but she's doing okay. I'm a data analyst, and I'm engaged to my fiancé, Ryan, 30 million. We've been together for 5 years and are planning our own wedding next spring. Emma got engaged last year to her fiancé, Ben. I was genuinely happy for her, despite everything. But then the drama started. Emma and Ben threw an extravagant engagement party last year. I was one of the bridesmaids, and I offered to help set up. I spent the whole day running around, coordinating deliveries, and decorating the venue. When the party started, Emma gave a toast and thanked everyone except me. She even singled out her best friend Sarah for helping so much. When I brought it up later, Emma brushed it off, saying, "Oh, I just forgot. You're so sensitive." A few months ago, Emma chose bridesmaid dresses. She picked this awful pale pink color that clashed horribly with my skin tone. When I asked if we could consider a different shade, she snapped, "It's my wedding, not yours. You can deal with it." I decided to suck it up and ordered the dress, but it was a nightmare. The fit was terrible, and I had to pay over $200 for alterations. Emma's response? "That's the price of being in a wedding." Last month was Emma's bachelorette party, which was a weekend getaway in Miami. I couldn't afford it, especially with my own wedding expenses coming up. When I told Emma, she said, "Wow, I guess I know where your priorities lie." She didn't even try to understand my situation. To make matters worse, she posted pictures all over Instagram with captions like, My real bridesmaids who would do anything for me, hard eyes. Last week, Emma called me to confirm that I would give a speech at her wedding. This was the first I'd heard of it. She claimed she'd mentioned it months ago, which is a lie. When I tried to explain that I wasn't comfortable giving an impromptu speech, she accused me of trying to ruin her big day. Then came the real kicker. Emma told me that she didn't want Ryan at the wedding. Apparently, Ben doesn't like him because Ryan called him out for making a sexist joke at a family dinner. Ryan is my partner, and I refuse to go to a wedding where he's not welcome. When I told Emma this, she exploded, saying I was selfish and trying to make everything about me. My parents, of course, are taking Emma's side. They think I should apologize and attend the wedding for family harmony. Even Ryan thinks I should just suck it up for one day, but I'm so tired of bending over backward for Emma. So, Reddit? AETA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding? My sister has always been the golden child, and her wedding planning has been a nightmare. She excluded me from speeches, dismissed my concerns, and even uninvited my fiancé. Now my family wants me to apologize and attend her wedding, but I've had enough. Am I the asshole? AITA for not letting my sister move back in after she took advantage of my kindness? I have always been the responsible one in my family. My parents were young when they had me and my sister, Jenna, and growing up, I often played the role of caretaker. I helped with homework, made dinner, and even mediated fights between Jenna and our parents. As we grew older, this dynamic didn't change much. I was still the one picking up the pieces when things went wrong for Jenna. Jenna has always been, let's say, free-spirited. She's the type who'd quit a job on a whim or move across the country because she met someone on a dating app. While I admire her adventurousness, it's left her financially unstable. Meanwhile, I worked hard, went to college, and built a steady career in marketing. I recently bought a modest house, a milestone I'm incredibly proud of. Last year, Jenna's luck took a turn for the worse. She broke up with her boyfriend, lost her job, and was evicted from her apartment. She called me in tears, begging to move in temporarily while she got back on her feet. Despite some reservations, I agreed. Family is family, right? At first, things were okay. Jenna seemed grateful and even helped around the house. But within a few weeks, problems started. She stopped looking for a job and spent most days binge-watching TV or going out with friends. She'd come home late, often bringing people over without asking. My grocery bill doubled, and she never once offered to contribute. When I confronted her, she'd say, "I'm trying my best. You're so uptight." The final straw came when I found out she was using my credit card without permission. She'd memorized the numbers when I'd asked her to grab something online for me once. She'd racked up over $1,200 on things like clothes, takeout, and even a concert ticket. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "You make good money." What's the big deal? I was livid. I told her she needed to leave immediately. She called me heartless and stormed out. That was 6 months ago. Jenna moved in with a friend, and we've had minimal contact since. My parents, however, are furious with me. They keep saying I should have been more patient and that Jenna's always been like this. My mom even suggested that I owe it to Jenna because I've always had it together, and she hasn't. I've tried explaining that it's not about the money. It's about trust. But they're not hearing me. Now Jenna's in trouble again. Her friend kicked her out, and she's couch surfing. My parents have offered to let her move in with them, but they're pressuring me to take her back, saying they're too old to deal with her. I've held firm, saying she burned that bridge, but the guilt is eating at me. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for not letting my sister move back in? Should I give her another chance? Or am I right to set boundaries, even if it means she's struggling? Update. I didn't expect this post to blow up the way it did. Thank you for all the comments and advice. It's been eye-opening. A lot of you asked for updates, so here's what happened next. After posting, I decided to have a sit-down conversation with my parents. I explained everything Jenna had done while she lived with me, including the credit card theft. My dad seemed shocked, but my mom brushed it off, saying, "Well, she's family." That phrase has been their go-to defense for Jenna for years, and I realized it was part of the problem. By constantly enabling her, they've allowed her to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. I told them that if they truly believed Jenna needed help, they should step up and let her move in with them. My mom tried the "we're too old" excuse again, but I didn't budge. I reminded them that I'm not Jenna's parent, and it's not my job to fix her life. Jenna found out about our conversation and called me furious. She accused me of turning our parents against her and ruining her life. I stayed calm and told her I wasn't the one who'd stolen from family or taken advantage of their kindness. She hung up on me, and we haven't spoken since. My parents reluctantly agreed to let Jenna move in with them, but they've made it clear they're not happy about it. I've decided to go low contact for now. It's hard, but I'm focusing on my own well-being for a change. It's been a few months, and Jenna is still living with my parents. From what I hear, things aren't going great. She's had several blow-ups with them and hasn't made much progress in terms of finding a job or getting her life together. I feel bad for my parents, but I know I made the right decision. Setting boundaries was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's also been one of the most freeing. I've started therapy to work through the guilt and resentment I've carried for years. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living my own life, not someone else's. So am I the asshole? Maybe to Jenna and my parents I am, but to myself? I finally feel like I'm not. AITA for confronting my sister and husband after finding out they cheated together? I am absolutely devastated right now, and I don't know where to turn. I found out that my husband and my sister have been cheating together for months, and I'm torn between feeling betrayed, angry, and heartbroken. I want to know if I'm overreacting, or if I'm right to feel completely shattered by what they've done. Here's some backstory. I've been married to my husband for 3 years, and we've had our ups and downs. But honestly, I always thought we had a solid relationship. We've been through tough times, but we made it through. My sister and I, on the other hand, have always been very close. We've had each other's backs for years. I've helped her with boyfriends, supported her when she struggled, and we've always been there for one another. She's one of the few people I truly trust in this world. A week ago, I was looking through my husband's phone, totally by accident, mind you. We've never had trust issues before, but I saw a message from my sister pop up. She had texted him late one night, and it seemed off. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me to dig a little deeper. I went through the messages and found flirtatious texts, plans to meet up, and even intimate photos. It took me a while to piece it all together, but there was no mistaking what I was seeing. They had been seeing each other behind my back for months. I confronted my sister first, and I was numb when I asked her about it. She denied it at first, but after some prodding, she admitted it. She said it just happened, and that she was so sorry for what she'd done. She told me she was ashamed, but it felt so hollow. She kept saying how much she loved me, but I could barely hear her words. All I could hear was the betrayal ringing in my ears. Then I called my husband. I felt like my entire world was falling apart as I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He apologized over and over, saying that it was a moment of weakness and that he still loved me. He told me that nothing had changed between us, but I didn't know how to take that. How could I ever trust him again after this? I'm feeling so torn. My family is telling me that everyone makes mistakes and that I should forgive them. They're urging me to try to move past it and not make any rash decisions. But I can't stop replaying everything in my head. The thought of my sister and husband sneaking around behind my back. The thought that the two people I loved most were deceiving me. I don't know if I can ever forgive them. Part of me wants to cut them both out of my life completely. Another part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh and if I should try to repair my marriage and relationship with my sister. Everyone says I should try to move forward, but I feel like my trust has been shattered beyond repair. I'm not even sure who I am anymore. So, AITA for confronting them and considering ending my relationships with both my husband and sister? Or am I overreacting? I just don't know what to do anymore. AITA for wanting to change my family dynamic? I've spent the past month grappling with this situation, and I'm at my wit's end. I need an outside perspective. I'm a 32-year-old woman married to my husband, Mark, for 6 years. We have 2 kids, Lily and Ethan. On the surface, our life seems great. Mark has a stable job, I work part-time remotely, and we've managed to juggle our lives well. But the core of my dilemma is my family. Not my husband and kids, but my parents and siblings. I grew up in a household with 3 younger siblings, Emma, Luke, and Sarah. My parents were intense. They believed in a rigid structure, with me as the pseudo-parent since I was the oldest. I was expected to help with everything: meals, cleaning, homework, and babysitting my siblings. My parents emphasized that family helps family, but what it really meant was I carried a lot of the responsibility while they focused on their careers. I didn't resent it as much when I was younger. It was my normal, and I thought it was the same for everyone. But as I grew older and saw how my friends' families operated, I started to feel the weight of it. When I moved out for college, it was like a switch flipped. My parents started calling me daily to guide my siblings. I was still expected to play an active role in their lives despite living hours away. Fast forward to now. My siblings are all adults. Emma's a nurse, Luke's an engineer, and Sarah's in grad school. Yet, I'm still the default for everything. Need advice? Call me. Struggling with a relationship? I'll mediate. My parents still encourage this dynamic, praising me for being the rock of the family. It's exhausting. Things escalated last month when my parents announced they were selling their house and moving to a smaller place near Emma. They told me they expected me to host family gatherings moving forward because my home has more space. I was stunned. Hosting the occasional gathering is one thing, but my parents' vision is for me to become the hub for every holiday, birthday, and event. When I expressed hesitation, they dismissed it, saying, "You're so good at this sort of thing, and it's just what families do." Mark was equally shocked. He supports me, but said I needed to set boundaries. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving. My parents insisted we host, despite me saying I wasn't up for it. When they arrived, they brought a mountain of food, but nothing was prepared. They said they assumed I'd handle it. Meanwhile, my siblings, bless them, showed up empty-handed, expecting to be served. It was chaos. My kids were cranky, the house was a mess, and I spent the day running around while everyone else relaxed. After everyone left, Mark and I had a long talk. He pointed out how much I've sacrificed for my family and how it's negatively impacting our own little unit. He's right. I'm stretched thin, and it's not sustainable. But when I brought this up to my parents, they accused me of being selfish. My mom said, "We all rely on you because you're capable. Don't punish us for that." My dad added, "You're the glue that holds us together." My siblings have been mostly neutral, though Emma hinted she doesn't see the big deal since I've always managed fine. Luke joked that I was overreacting, and Sarah said I was being mean to our parents. I've started scaling back, saying no to things, and prioritizing my husband and kids. The backlash has been immense. My parents call daily, alternating between guilt trips and anger. My siblings are distant, clearly upset I'm not as involved. Even Mark's gotten some passive-aggressive comments during family interactions, implying he's changed me. I know I'm not perfect. Maybe I should have set boundaries earlier. But am I really the asshole for wanting to shift this dynamic? For prioritizing my mental health and my family over my parents' expectations? They act like I'm abandoning them, but I feel like I'm finally stepping into the life I want. AITA? It all started with a post on a subreddit dedicated to eerie, unexplained events. Jane, a 32-year-old freelance writer, stumbled upon a thread titled, "What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you?" The top comment recounted a chilling tale of a shadowy figure appearing in a family's home. Intrigued, Jane began diving deeper into the thread. Many of the stories were likely embellished, but some carried an unsettling air of authenticity. One story stood out. A user described a house in a rural part of Maine that was infamous for unexplained disappearances. The house, they claimed, was once home to a reclusive family known for practicing strange rituals. Jane's curiosity got the better of her. She bookmarked the thread and spent the night researching. As the hours ticked by, She found more mentions of the house, each story more ominous than the last. The house was real. Located in the middle of dense woods, it had been abandoned for decades. Locals referred to it as the Whispering House, named after the strange murmurs visitors claimed to hear around it. Despite the warnings, Jane's writer's instincts kicked in. This was a story begging to be told. A week later, Jane packed her car and drove to Maine. She told herself it was just research for her next big project. But deep down, she felt an unexplainable pull toward the house. The drive was uneventful until she reached the outskirts of the small town near the house. The atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier. The trees seemed to loom closer to the road, and the sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. Jane checked into a modest motel and spent the evening chatting with the locals at a nearby diner. When she mentioned the Whispering House, the mood changed. Conversations ceased, and all eyes turned to her. An elderly man, Hank, finally spoke up. "You're better off staying away from that place. It's not just stories, miss. People go missing out there." "Missing how?" Jane asked, her curiosity piqued. "They go in and they don't come out," Hank said grimly. Another local chimed in, describing eerie sightings of lights flickering in the windows, shadows moving despite the house being abandoned. Jane's skepticism faltered, but she dismissed their warnings as superstition. She thanked them for their concern and returned to her motel to plan her visit. That night, her sleep was plagued with vivid dreams of the house. She saw herself standing in its decayed living room, a figure watching her from the shadows. When she woke, her sheets were damp with sweat. The next morning, armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a notebook, Jane set off for the house. The road leading there was overgrown, forcing her to park and walk the remaining distance. As she approached, the house came into view. It was a crumbling two-story structure, its windows shattered, and its paint long faded to a sickly gray. The trees around it seemed unnaturally twisted, their branches clawing at the sky. Jane hesitated at the threshold. The air around the house was unnervingly quiet, devoid of the usual forest sounds. She stepped inside, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The interior was worse than she imagined. Graffiti covered the walls, and the floorboards creaked ominously under her weight. She began documenting her surroundings, snapping pictures and jotting down notes. The house was eerily cold, and Jane found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder. She explored the first floor, finding nothing but decay and rot. Then she moved to the staircase. Each step groaned as she ascended. The second floor was darker, the windows covered in grime. She entered what appeared to be a bedroom. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the floor was littered with candles melted into grotesque shapes. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the room looked exactly like the one from her dream. Jane's camera malfunctioned when she tried to take a picture. Frustrated, she gave up and began sketching the symbols in her notebook. As she worked, she heard a faint whisper. She froze, straining to hear. The whisper grew louder, but she couldn't discern any words. Her flashlight flickered, plunging her into momentary darkness. When the light returned, she saw it, a figure standing in the corner. It was tall and impossibly thin, its face obscured by shadows. Jane's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, dropping her notebook. The figure didn't move, but seemed to radiate a palpable sense of malice. "Who are you?" Jane managed to whisper. The figure tilted its head, the motion unnaturally jerky. The whispers grew louder, filling her ears. Unable to take it anymore, Jane bolted. She raced down the stairs, nearly tripping in her haste. She didn't stop running until she was outside, gasping for air. Back at the motel, Jane tried to rationalize what she had seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light, her mind playing tricks on her. But when she opened her camera, she found a single, chilling photo she didn't remember taking. The shadowy figure standing in the bedroom, staring directly at the camera. Jane decided to leave town the next morning, but her ordeal wasn't over. That night, she woke to the sound of whispers. Her room was freezing, her breath visible in the air. She turned on the light, only to see her notebook lying open on the desk, the pages filled with writing she didn't recognize. The symbols from the house were scrawled across every page. Panic set in. She grabbed the notebook and fled to her car. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the motel's parking lot, watching her. Jane never wrote about the Whispering House. She deleted all her notes and photos, determined to put the experience behind her. But the whispers followed her. At night, she would hear them, faint but persistent. Objects in her home began to move on their own. And sometimes in the corner of her eye, she would see the shadowy figure, always watching. Desperate, she reached out to the Reddit community, posting her story in the same thread where she had first learned about the house. Responses poured in, some offering advice, others sharing similar experiences. One comment stood out. "You've brought it with you. It won't stop until it gets what it wants." Jane replied, asking what it wanted. The user's response was immediate and chilling. "You." The whispers grew louder, the figure more frequent. Jane's mental state deteriorated. She stopped going outside, her once vibrant career left in ruins. Weeks turned into months, and Jane's friends stopped hearing from her. One day, her neighbor noticed a foul smell coming from her apartment. The police were called. They found Jane's lifeless body in her bedroom, her face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. The walls were covered in the same symbols from the house, drawn in what appeared to be her own blood. Her death was ruled a suicide, but those who knew the truth weren't convinced. Her Reddit account was active days after her death, posting cryptic messages and linking to new threads about unexplained disappearances. The Whispering House remains abandoned, but its legend grows. New Reddit threads discuss Jane's story, each adding their own theories and speculations. And some users claim that if you visit the house, you can still hear her whispers, begging for help.